As many of you are aware, every year at our church's annual service auction in April, I like to offer the opportunity for a congregant to choose the topic of a sermon to be delivered later in the year. Last year, we actually had 2 individuals win a sermon topic, and I'm fulfilling one of those requests today. And the other one, Lippincotts, I promise, is coming. I promise. So for a second straight year, Eric Ledyard won the right to select a sermon topic for me to preach on. And you may recall last year, he had me do an impromptu sermon in which the topic wasn't revealed to me until 30 minutes before I had to preach. That was a fun one. It was fun. Well, this year, Eric decided to gift his right to select a sermon topic to his 12-year-old son, Duncan. Duncan's right here, Duncan. So Duncan, like me, is an avid comic book fan. So he asked me to deliver a sermon about the Marvel comic superhero, Doctor Strange. And that is what we're going to be talking about in this very intentional, multi-generational service this morning. But Doctor Strange, that's a tricky subject. Oh, is she okay? Sorry. Oh, I wish I had the power to just heal immediately and just, that is a magic parents do have, though. Tricky to do Doctor Strange. Difficult topic because, y'all know, I love preaching about superheroes. I love preaching about comic book characters. I think that superheroes and supervillains are simply contemporary expressions of archetypal figures buried deep in the collective human unconscious. They are modern myth, and an earnest study of them can reveal a great deal about ourselves, about our culture, our values, so I can easily talk about comics all day. But I also realize that not everyone is as big of a comic book nerd as I am, and so I generally try to limit my superhero sermons to the better-known characters, like Superman or Batman. And although Doctor Strange is certainly an interesting character, and even though Marvel just released a Doctor Strange movie last year, he's pretty much, if we're being honest, a B-list superhero that few people recognize. So this morning, to get everyone on the same page, I'm going to start by recapping what Eli very masterfully conveyed to us as he portrayed Dr. Stephen Strange a little bit earlier. And I'm going to connect the ways that I think that Dr. Strange could be a model Unitarian Universalist hero. So Stephen Strange, as we heard earlier, is a doctor. He is a gifted surgeon. He's incredibly rational, he's hyper-intelligent, and he knows it. He is proud of it, which sometimes makes him appear a little egotistical and unwilling to listen to others. Parenthetically, do you see already why he might make a good UU hero? Look, I love our faith, but we also have to own our shadow side. But we're working on it, I hope. Anyway, Dr. Strange gets into a car accident in which he suffers massive damage to the nerves in his hands. His career as a surgeon is over. When Western medicine cannot cure him, he travels to the East, where he learns the mystic arts under the tutelage of a powerful sorcerer known only as the Ancient One. And thus, Dr. Strange becomes a master magician himself and dedicates his life to protecting the earth from mystical threats. We learn all this and more about Doctor Strange in the eponymous Marvel Studios movie released last year. And I really have to admit, I think Duncan was really onto something when he requested a sermon about this character and this movie. One online publication called the movie Doctor Strange Marvel's most theological movie. And in looking at several online reviews of the movie, I can tell you that this film apparently upset both fundamentalist Christians and fundamentalist atheists. So you know it has to be good. Not only are there important and thought-provoking morals conveyed in the movie, there are also themes and ideas that resonate on a particularly Unitarian Universalist level. For example, Doctor Strange's primary adversary is a sorcerer whose goal is to bestow unto his followers an otherworldly existence without time, age, or death. In other words, eternal life. And to achieve his dream of eternity, this villain is willing to sacrifice this temporally bound physical earth, this world of both time and space. Interesting. And at the end of the movie, A sequel is teased. And it's clear that Doctor Strange's next antagonist will be a former colleague who has become blinded by religious and philosophical fundamentalism. He is a man who demands moral and doctrinal purity in all things, a man who cannot accept paradox, contradiction, complexity, or nuance. He's a man who cannot hold space for many truths at once. Also, interesting. I think it's interesting enough that I've gone ahead, I've talked with Tyler, and we're actually going to make Doctor Strange our next church-wide popcorn theology event. So we will have a showing of that here at the church, followed by a conversation, and I'm going to make sure that Duncan is there to help lead that discussion. But for today, knowing that we all have not watched the movie, I'm going to speak a little more generally about Doctor Strange's strange place in the Marvel comic universe. Why he has historically been a polarizing figure amongst old school comic book nerds like me, and what lessons we UUs might be able to take from all of this. I freely admit that I have never been much of a Doctor Strange fan. In fact, I've always kind of protested his existence in the Marvel Comics universe. And I'm not the only one to do this. If you go to Google and you type in the words, "magic doesn't belong in the Marvel universe," Google will fetch you approximately 1.7 million web pages on the issue. See, there are many comic book purists like me who believe that magic simply doesn't belong in the Marvel universe. See, now magic itself is fine. I like magic. You know, I loved reading about Merlin in the Arthurian romance. I loved watching the wizard duel between Gandalf and Saruman and Lord of the Rings. Harry Potter. I'm personally not a huge fan, but I hear it's kind of popular, so that's okay. Magic's great. But magic and magic wielders belong to a particular genre of fiction known as fantasy. And that, in my opinion at least, is where magic belongs. Comic books are not a part of the fantasy genre. Comic book superheroes fit far better into the genre of science fiction. I want you to think about this. By and large, comic book heroes and villains, they get their superpowers in ways that at least pretend to be scientific. Superman is an alien. Iron Man, robotic suit. Wolverine, mutated DNA. Captain America becomes a super soldier by taking a bunch of steroids. Spider-Man, body altered by a bite from an irradiated spider. Science-ish. Fanciful science, but still within the realm of possibility. These superpowers, improbable though they may be, nevertheless have a rational origin that can be explained in totally materialistic terms. But not so with magic. Magic has no rational basis. It is beyond the purely physical and material. It suggests the possibility that there is something beyond the natural, supernatural. Instead of science, it's more like religion. So I guess my personal problem is the colliding of worlds. Fantasy and sci-fi are separated, and they should not mingle. We should build a huge wall separating fantasy from sci-fi, and maybe we should make the wizards pay for it. I mean, come on, science and religion, rationality and mysticism, concern for the physical and concern for the spiritual, all mixed together in one thing? What would that hybrid monstrosity even look like? Would it look like the Unitarian Universalism? Doctor Strange proves that the Marvel Universe is big enough for both the rational and the mystical. So too, I believe our world is big enough for both. And our faith, Unitarian Universalism, I believe, can be an expression of that. Our UU heritage, for example, is deeply Christian. And Christianity, like most other religions, certainly has its share of mystical, magical, and miraculous stories and elements. That is who we were, and it is still a part of who we are today. But as a modern faith, we also explicitly heed the guidance of reason and the results of science. We have proudly incorporated into our faith a strong humanist tradition. But I can also then tell you that in speaking to other UU leaders and UU pastors, some of the biggest growth happening right now within our pluralistic faith is among those who practice earth-centered traditions. And these folks have no qualms at all about using the term magic to describe their rituals, beliefs, and practices. So what is the role of the mystic and the magical in Unitarian Universalism? Is a belief in a purely materialistic universe compatible with a belief in the supernatural? If so, how? If not, what does that mean for those of us on differing sides of that question? How do we engage in deep and authentic relationships with people who have completely different ideas about the mechanics and nature, and thus the purpose of this universe that we share? These are really good questions, but they're also too big for us to cover in any depth this morning. But I do believe that they are questions that our faith compels us to struggle with, not only so that we can better understand how to live in community among ourselves here in this church, but also so that we can better understand and better relate to others who hail from other faith traditions or who come from no faith tradition at all. And in this day and age right now, that is a skill we all desperately need. For the remainder of my sermon today, though, I want to examine the idea of magic through a slightly more metaphoric, a slightly more literary lens. When magic is depicted in literature, movies, role-playing games, and religion, there are certain patterns or tropes that have developed that I think are worthy of note and that we can learn some lessons from. And because the number 5 is a deeply significant and meaningful number in many systems of magic, today I will give you 5 points to consider about magic. First point, magic is often the defense of the weak. And for those who are listening to this sermon on a podcast in the future, I want to note that I just made funny quotes around the word weak. Doctor Strange is actually a really good example of this. He is one of the few Marvel superheroes to have gray in his hair and also a physical disability, his hands. In the fictional world, generally speaking, I ask you this question: who generally are the magicians? Often they are the elderly, the frail, the infirmed and disabled, children, women. Magic is the defense of the weak and the weapon of the marginalized. Magic wielders are rarely young, healthy, muscle-bound men, because those characters already have their power. But for those who do not have access to weapons, for those who lack brawn, magic is the great leveler. That's how Doctor Strange can defeat the Incredible Hulk in a showdown. Stories of magic, then, are stories often where the weak become strong. Even in the stories of Jesus, think about this: Jesus uses magic to make the blind see, to help the paralyzed walk, to make the hungry satisfied. That tells me that there is something about the human imagination that compels us to create stories in which fairness, equality, and justice always triumph. And often that is exactly what magic does. A second point on magic related to the first: magic is subversive. You've perhaps heard the terms black magic, the dark arts. Magic is often glorified in mythology, but demonized in history. In real life, magic is often associated with darkness and evil and the devil. The Bible, for instance, is filled with strongly worded condemnation for all manner of witchcraft and sorcery. And why is that? Well, if magic truly is the great power leveler, if it is the weapon of the weak, the marginalized, and the oppressed, then the powers that be will do everything they can to define magic as sin in order to help maintain their control of the status quo. Without getting into a lengthy history lesson this morning, I can tell you that witchcraft has, since ancient times, been a form of female empowerment. So what is it then that happens to witchcraft in every male-dominated society? It is outlawed by church and state. Witches are put to death. So remember that discrimination against magic is a form of social control, and stories of magic are often narratives of subversion where the oppressed throw off their chains. Third point. One of the most famous branches of magic, both fictional and historical, was alchemy. Alchemy was the medieval practice of trying to transform or transmogrify matter, and often more specifically, trying to turn lead into gold. Alchemists never succeeded in that endeavor, but ironically enough, alchemy, which on first blush sounds like a failure of crackpot mysticism, alchemy eventually transformed and transmogrified itself into a legitimate science that has arguably been more valuable to the human race than any amount of gold. Ancient alchemy laid the groundwork for modern chemistry. And I like to think, on a metaphoric level at least, that all of us are alchemists at heart. I think it's a common trait of all human beings, a key to the resiliency of our species. There's something about us humans, we keep taking lead and try to turn it into gold. We take failure and we keep working it over until it becomes success. Through our stories, through our story-generating minds, we take chaos and senselessness and we create from that order and meaning. We never stop looking for ways to harvest beauty from fields made desolate by tragedy. You know, the Women's March in DC never would have happened if Hillary Clinton had won the presidency. God bless all you alchemists out there. Fourth point, in order to make the alchemy work, in order to make any magic happen, you have to believe. Every system of magic requires faith. You have to believe in yourself. Jesus, who I would call a magician of sorts, said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Now, if you're not personally persuaded by the words of Jesus from Matthew chapter 17, perhaps you'll be persuaded by the words of Yoda from Star Wars Episode 5. Remember at Empire when Luke tried to use the Force to lift his ship up out of the swamp? He couldn't do it, but Yoda could. And then with incredulous eyes, Luke looks at the resurrected ship and he says, "I can't believe it." And Yoda replies, "That is why you fail." I don't know if faith in yourself can make you literally move mountains or X-Wing fighters. But there is one thing that I am sure of. You will never transform yourself. You will never transform the world if you don't first believe you have the power within yourself to do it. Faith alone will change nothing, but without faith, nothing will change. Our fifth and final point. Magic is in the words. If you're a magician, and all of you just might be, and you want to do something magical, you can wave a wand, you can mix a potion, but most of the time you're going to cast a spell. Spell. The etymology of the word spell is fascinating and complex. The first use of the word spell in a magical sense goes back to about the 16th century, and it appears to be connected to our modern understanding of the word spell, which of course means to form a word letter by letter. But the word spell is also connected to the idea of telling stories, even specifically of delivering a sermon. The larger point is that we have always known that magic comes from words, that words themselves are potently magical. Words matter. In most instances, words are more powerful than actions. There's a reason we all know the aphorism, the pen is mightier than the sword. Wars are started and ended with words. Our Constitution and the rights identified within it are words. Our Unitarian Universalist 7 principles are words. Systems of oppression are perpetuated by language and words because words shape our perception of reality, thus shaping reality itself. If you do not understand the power of language and words, may I suggest go back and read 1984 by George Orwell. It has recently moved back to the top of the bestseller list after nearly 70 years. I wonder why. With physical tools, you can heal or destroy a body, but with mere words, you can heal or destroy a soul. When I think about the immense power of words, I remember one day back when I was about 15 years old. One of my teachers, a man that I held in high esteem, one day looked me in the eyes and he said, "You're a pastor." Now, did his words cause me to become a pastor nearly 2 decades later? I don't know, but I can tell you, I sure do still remember his words. I also remember when I was about 10 years old, a family member once looked me in the eyes and called me lazy and stupid. I have never forgotten those words, and much of my life has been spent trying to prove those words wrong. I've healed from the wound caused by those words, but I think as evidenced by the fact that I still remember them, clearly a scar remains. Our words have the power to both create and destroy, to harm or to heal. We can use our words and our power to create a better world in manifold ways. We can use our words to lift each other up, to support one another instead of tearing each other down and apart through unnecessary criticism. There is so much violence in our words that we so rarely ever see. But we can choose to be free and liberal with our compliments to one another and our expressions of gratitude to one another. I encourage you, speak good over your family. Speak good over your friends. Speak good over your community and watch the magic happen. I don't know about you, but I desperately need a world right now with a little bit of magic in it. Because this world is in need of some transformation. We need a little power to level the playing field, to liberate the oppressed, to transform heartache into hope. The magic is in our faith, in our action, and in our words. And the very good news I have for all of you this morning, you are all, each of you, magical beings. You each have a hidden power to influence and transform this world around you. So my charge to you this week, let us not be afraid to use that magic. Blessed be.